much for this time. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Yeah.
This is your first time in Mexico?
No, it's my first time in Mexico City, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you find? Is it exciting to find readers in Spanish? Today you're gonna see them here in
Yeah.
our bookstore.
It's so exciting. I never thought this book would find an audience around the world, and I'm just grateful and flattered that people want to read it and want to hear me talk about it.
Well, thank you so much for having. For giving us the opportunity to talk to you about it.
Oh, of course.
So, we want to talk about If We Were Billions. In Spanish is Todos, somos villanos, which have just been released in Spanish. Thank you to Editorial Urano. In the era of the true crime podcasts and the serial killers on TV documentaries, you wrote a novel with a theatrical approach, which is really interesting. Do you think each one of us is a character in our own drama stage?
Oh, well, I think Shakespeare would say so. He said all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. And, I think we play a lot of parts in life and we're assigned different roles, whether it's you're a daughter, you're a sister, you're a worker. And you play different parts depending on what environment you're in and who you're with. So I think we all have a little bit of an actor down there somewhere.
How did the story came about? How did it came true to you? How did it start?
Well, so I actually was an actor. I was an actor for almost 20 years. And when I was in college, I was working on my senior honors thesis, which was all about Shakespearean tragic structure. And at that point, I'd written a couple of novels, but none of them were very good. And I wasn't really sure why. And then I thought about there's this piece of advice you hear when you're a writer, which is write what you know. And I wasn't doing that because I was young and didn't think that advice applied to me. And then by the time I was, in my senior year of college and starting to think about this book, I went, okay, you've been an actor for a long time. Why have you never written about that? Because I had never seen a novel that really got backstage the way that Villains does. And I really wanted to bring that world to life because it is such a rich, strange world that I knew really well. So that's kind of where Villains came from.
Yeah, that's the real drama.
Yeah, that's real drama.
Coming back to Shakespeare, Shakespeare has been considered the master of philosophical passion. And somehow you are giving us 7 young characters with an awareness in their own passions. Shall we all be aware of the darkness that drives us to fulfill our desires? And how did you start, a 2-part question, how did you start to develop these characters?
Yeah, I think everyone has elements of good and bad in them. I don't think anyone is all good or all bad, and really nothing is kind of black and white like that. But a lot of fiction works that way. You have good guys and bad guys, and there's a happily ever after for the good guys. And one thing I really love about Shakespeare and his tragedies in particular is it's a lot of moral gray areas. So not totally good, not totally bad, and just because you're good doesn't mean things are going to go well for you. And that was something I really wanted to capture with Villains, is this kind of tension between the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do. And sometimes it can be really difficult to know which is which, especially when you're in your early 20s, like all of these characters. They're young. They're old enough to be legal adults, but they're still young enough to make really stupid mistakes. And that was just interesting to me. Like, that's automatic drama as you're kind of like learning how to be an adult and you're really screwing it up the first couple of years. And I think Shakespeare captures that tension and that passion really, really, really well, which is what drew me to it as an actor, and also what I thought would make, great raw material for a novel.
Of course. And that's probably why you wanted to explore those motivations, because the passion.
Yeah.
What drives passion?
Yeah.
That would be super. I mean, the moment we can define what really drives it and how it's a temptation and it's a spark that it could ignite something good.
Yeah.
And it
could be really dangerous.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
Delacher Conservatory, the place where it all happens, is a quiet, exclusive, and almost elitist place.
Oh, yes, very.
How did you start developing that idea to set the story there?
Yeah, so I actually didn't go to a conservatory school, but a lot of my friends did. And I did go to a conservatory summer program when I was about 16. And it was very competitive and very intense. And That's, you know, when you talk about passion, like something like that, it is passionate, but it is also dangerous because you can get really, really deep into the weeds. And academia is a really special place, sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a bad way, where it fosters that kind of competition and exclusivity. And that can do a lot of damage. And I was really interested in that. So that did become a big element of the novel because I was curious about, you know, what happens when you take a group of passionate young people and then put them under enormous pressure to perform. And they crack up because that's what happens.
Exactly. Did you take anything from your friends?
I get that question a lot. People always want to know which character is you? Are they your friends? And
Don't tell us specifically, but I mean, it's fun when you find a thread of a story and
sure.
you know you can take a little bit of the real side.
Yeah. I mean, what I'll say is, you know, none of the characters were based on individual people that I knew. They were more based on like types of people that I encountered working in theater for as long as I did. When I was thinking about this book, I kind of went, okay, if you walked into a room where a bunch of Shakespearean actors were rehearsing, who are the personality types you would inevitably find in that space? And then the book also kind of becomes about how those characters then start to act against type and how things kind of fall apart when people don't fit into those boxes they're assigned. So that was an interesting part of it too.
How do you think, I mean, the people, for example, you say you have 20 years in acting. How, and then it's not only the trouble, how can I say, the difficulties that you can come across. It's not only the castings, the find the right play, the pay and everything. It's also those passions and the egos.
Yeah, it's a job that will eat you up and spit you out. And it's really, really difficult to be an actor. When I was in college, a professor said to a class of us, he said, don't become an actor if you can imagine yourself doing anything else, because it is such a hard line of work to be in. But you do it because you're passionate about it. It's really hard to walk away from. So it is very much a love-hate kind of a thing. And academia is the same way, which is why those two things dovetailed really nicely in the book. And I would say that writing is similar. Writing is difficult. Writing is competitive because so many people want to write books and want to get published that you have to find a way to stand out from the crowd and you have to work really hard. And you will go through a lot of rejections before you ever get a yes. And, you know, I still get rejected all the time. It's just kind of part of the business. Yeah. So you have to have a very thick skin in any of those fields.
And you still find joy with all of that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it has to be worth it, you know, and if it's not worth it, you don't do it. But I really love writing. I really love theater. I really love making art. And I feel unbelievably lucky that I get to do that for my job.
Do you see yourself more writing now that you have experienced it?
Yeah, I mean, and I've been a writer for a long time. I wrote a bunch of novels that didn't get published before Villains because they just weren't very good. And I kind of took a hiatus from writing to get my PhD. So I did that. I was in academia for like 12 years, all told. It didn't take me 12 years to get my PhD. I also did a master's degree and took a couple gap years. And that was partly because when Villains first came out, it didn't do super well. It didn't actually start to find readers until like 3 years after it had come out. So that was kind of a surprise. And I didn't think I was ever going to get to publish again. So I am very lucky that I get to pivot back to writing now. So I have 2 new books in the pipeline that I'm really excited about.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
I hope they get translated to Spanish also.
They will. They've actually already been picked up by my Spanish publisher. So yeah, so Graveyard Shift and Hot Wax will both be coming in Spanish.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I hope to see you again and ask you
definitely.
how you're doing down the line.
It's a date. We'll do it.
Thank you. Well, I want to talk a little bit of these 7 young people again. Men and women in their early 20s are like any other boy or girl. You may say they want to be successful and happy, but they speak in Shakespeare dialogues. That was really interesting. Did you want to make a statement about the topicality of his literature, or how did he come across that?
Yeah, kind of. You know, it's people I think have a misconception about Shakespeare and what he is, because you know we kind of hold him up as like the greatest poet in the English language or whatever. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but in his own time, you know, Shakespeare wrote for a popular audience. He does write some very lofty, beautiful speeches, but you know, he also writes entire scenes that are knock-knock jokes. So it's highbrow and lowbrow at the same time, and that's what I really love about it. Is it's deep and dramatic, but it's also light and it's funny. And I was a teacher for a long time. I teach young people and I teach Shakespeare to young people. And something I really wanted to do was to make it accessible and make it fun. So I kind of wanted to take Shakespeare and make it a little more rock and roll, make it kind of sex, drugs, and Shakespeare, because I thought that would be a little more fun. And it's also, that's kind of what actors are like. Even if they're getting on stage and they're being Hamlet at night, they're going home and they're being a disaster because that's just who they are.
Bullying and violence among youth, dysfunctional families, and the wealthy people drama all in the same pot.
Yeah.
You're giving us a glitch to all the postmodern conflicts through a classical author words. Why did you decide to use the theater structure to release a 21st century conflict?
Well, the thing is, I think there are some things about, and this is kind of a cliche, but there are some things about Shakespeare that are timeless. We still quote Hamlet, we still quote Macbeth to kind of explain our feelings when we can't find those words ourselves. And I didn't see any reason there needed to be a separation of those two things, because I have often found Shakespeare a real comfort or a real inspiration when I was going through some stuff. If you're 17 going through a breakup, Romeo and Juliet's going to be just as relevant to you as it was to a teenager in 1595, if you know how to read it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it was a goal, but one thing I wanted to do with Villains was make that literature accessible to a modern audience and make it fun.
That's amazing.
Because it is fun. I find it fun.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. This was a great interview. Great questions.
Thank you.